Picture this for a second. You spend decades building a life, meticulously gathering savings, filling a family home with memories, maybe even building a small business from the ground up. And then, suddenly, it's all left in complete legal limbo. So, what actually happens to everything you own if you die without a plan? Well, welcome to this explainer. Because if someone, let's just call him Alex, passes away without a valid will, it triggers a completely chaotic legal process. Provincial laws step in immediately, and suddenly all of Alex's life's work might be distributed completely against his wishes. It is a massive, sweeping mess that leaves grieving families entirely in the dark.
So let's dive into this and fix that. Today, we're exploring the ultimate guide to securing your legacy. And we're going to structure this entirely around Canadian financial literacy standards and CRA best practices. Think of this explainer as your direct roadmap to taking back control. It's all about making sure your assets are protected, your taxes are minimized, and the people you love are cared for exactly the way you intend, without jumping through a bunch of unnecessary legal hoops.
Here is the structured roadmap we're going to explore today to get your proactive financial planning on track. We've got 4 main stops. First, the anatomy of a valid will. Second, navigating probate. Third, substitute decision makers. And finally, protecting vulnerable seniors.
Okay, let's start with a really critical concept: intestate. This essentially means dying without a valid will, which leaves the provincial courts to step in, settle, and distribute your estate for you. So the absolute most crucial takeaway here is that without a proactive plan, you are surrendering all your control. Common law provincial intestacy laws just automatically take over. And for your family, that usually translates to incredibly costly legal delays, a total loss of control, and just immense anxiety. Someone you fully intended to provide for, like maybe a common law partner you've been with for years, might legally end up with absolutely nothing.
To prevent that kind of chaos, we really need a solid foundation. So let's move right into our first chapter: Anatomy of a Valid Will, the blueprint of your legacy.
The very core of this blueprint is your executor, or if you happen to be in Quebec, they're called a liquidator. This is the specific individual or even a corporation that you appoint to manage your affairs, pay off your debts, and eventually distribute your property. Basically, they are the legally responsible captain of your estate's ship. And let me tell you, it is a highly demanding role. It requires financial stability, really good judgment, and absolute integrity, all during what is obviously a deeply emotional time. Now, a lot of us just naturally default to naming a spouse or a child as our individual executor. But you really have to consider the tremendous risks of relying on an overwhelmed, grieving family member. They just might not have the time or the technical financial expertise to handle a really complex estate. On the flip side, you could appoint a corporate executor, like a specialized trust company, and they bring absolute impartiality, continuous availability, and deep tax expertise to the table. Plus, they don't take vacations, they don't get bogged down by messy family dynamics, and they will execute your wishes to the absolute letter. But beyond just picking the right executor, a truly robust will needs highly specific instructions to actually be effective. For example, a guardian appointment clause. That is absolutely vital if you have minor children, because it legally dictates who's going to care for them. Then there's the tax election clause. This is a super powerful tool that gives your executor the authority to make advantageous income tax elections on your estate's final return. Oh, and here is a huge common blind spot we've got to cover: the survivorship clause. By requiring a beneficiary to survive you by a set period, which is usually about 30 days, you actually prevent your assets from passing through the probate process twice in a super short time frame, and that effectively saves your estate from paying double the administrative fees.
And speaking of those fees, let's roll right into Section 2, navigating the probate process, validating your intentions.
So, probate. It's a word that causes a lot of people a lot of anxiety. But fundamentally, it's really just a formal legal process of validation, and it typically happens in 3 main steps. Step 1. The courts have to validate the will to confirm it was properly executed and is in fact your final unrevoked document. Step 2. Your executor applies to the court and they have to submit a highly detailed inventory of the estate's assets. And finally, Step 3. Once everything clears, the court issues a certificate of appointment, and that officially grants your executor the real legal power to act. It unlocks the bank accounts and allows the actual transfer of property.
But as you might guess, this validation process definitely comes at a cost. Depending on your specific province, probate fees can hit a pretty steep 1.5%. To put that in perspective, that's $15 for every single $1,000 of your estate's gross value. And remember, that is calculated on the total market value of your probatable assets before most of your debts are even deducted from it. Because yes, the government always makes sure they get their cut. So on a $1 million estate, your grieving family could be looking at handing over nearly $15,000 just in provincial administrative fees before they ever see a dime.
But hey, fortunately, there are some really proactive, fully CRA-aligned strategies to legally reduce the gross value of your estate before those fees are ever calculated. First up, using joint tenancy with survivorship. This means that when you pass away, the asset automatically passes to the surviving co-owner, completely bypassing the estate. Second, gifting during your lifetime. This actively reduces your holding value today, plus you actually get to see your loved ones enjoy the gift. And third, setting up inter vivos trusts, which you might know as living trusts. These can seamlessly transfer ownership while still protecting your ongoing interests. This right here is what true, compliant financial structuring looks like.
Now, a meticulously crafted will protects you after you pass. But what happens to your assets and your health while you are still alive, but maybe unable to speak for yourself? Let's move on to Section 3, your substitute decision makers, or power of attorney.
A power of attorney is basically written authority that grants someone else the legal power to make financial or personal decisions on your behalf. Quick note, if you're in Quebec, this is known as a mandate, and the person stepping in is called your mandatory. But everywhere else, it's your attorney. This is your essential living safety net. If you ever experience a severe medical emergency, an accident, or cognitive decline, and you become incapacitated, this legal document guarantees that someone you deeply trust can just seamlessly step in. They become your substitute decision maker, all without dragging your family through a painfully expensive court battle. Now, you actually need to secure two entirely distinct realms of authority here. On the one side, we have property and finance. This power allows your appointed attorney to manage your bank accounts, pay your mortgage, and oversee your investments. Basically, it makes sure your life doesn't fall into financial ruin while you're incapacitated. But on the other side, we have personal care and living wills. This is a totally separate power that authorizes someone to make critical, highly emotional medical choices, decide on your housing needs, and execute your specific end-of-life care instructions. So it is absolutely crucial that you have both of these bases explicitly covered. Unfortunately, as we all age and potentially face cognitive decline, we can become prime targets for exploitation. And that brings us to our final and honestly perhaps most critical section today, protecting our vulnerable seniors, red flags, and safeguards. I want you to just take a moment to process this shocking statistic. Roughly 40% of reported financial abuse among seniors is actually committed by adult children, spouses, and grandchildren. Elder financial abuse is a massive, growing crisis in this country. And the absolute hardest truth to swallow is that the threat often comes directly from within the family unit itself. So how do we spot this exploitation before it's too late? Well, the red flags are actually often hidden right in plain sight. Warning signs include things like highly unusual or totally unexplained ATM withdrawals, or maybe sudden, large transfers between accounts. Another major red flag is sudden caregiver isolation. That's when a family member, or maybe a new caregiver, suddenly completely cuts the senior off from their longtime friends and the rest of their family. And of course, suspicious, rapid changes to legal documents like that power of attorney we just talked about, especially when the senior doesn't really seem to fully grasp what it is they are signing. These are classic, undeniable indicators of coercion. And this is exactly where modern Canadian financial literacy standards introduce a really brilliant proactive safeguard. It's called the Trusted Contact Person, or TCP. Think of a TCP as an independent emergency contact, but specifically for your finances. Ideally, this is someone who has absolutely zero financial interest in your accounts, and they definitely should not be your active power of attorney. So if your financial institution suspects coercion, elder abuse, or just sees some completely erratic account behavior, they can actually reach out to your TCP. The TCP is just there to verify that your instructions are genuine, uncoerced, and truly in your own best interest. It's an invaluable extra layer of protection that everyone should have.
All right, we have covered a tremendous amount of ground in this explainer today. We've gone from the absolute necessity of a valid will and strategically navigating probate, all the way to the critical importance of substitute decision makers and fiercely safeguarding against abuse. So, as we wrap up, I'm going to leave you with this final, provocative question to really think about. Have you structured your legacy, and who will be your trusted contact person? Please, whatever you do, don't wait until a sudden crisis hits to figure all this out. Take immediate action on these financial best practices today. Protect your life's work and protect the people you love.